My first coding project was bad, like really bad. When I was early in college and new to programming, I wanted to create my own Android app as my first coding project. Not only was I new to the Android framework, but I was also new to the Java programming language itself. Some would say this would be a recipe for disaster, and you would be absolutely right. The code was absolutely horrendous. The app I made was called Horde Clicker. So Horde Clicker is an idle-based game where you click this Earth button a bunch of times, and each time you click it, you create more zombies. As you create more zombies by clicking this button, you can purchase upgrades for your zombies so that they spread the zombie apocalypse faster. So one zombie upgrade, for example, is Pounce. If you purchase this upgrade, you will make 50,000 zombies per second automatically, and each time you click, you will make 40 zombies. Other zombie upgrades are Exploding Limbs, Charge, Bulletproof, Duplication, Stealth, and some others, but the entire premise of the game is to eventually get to the point where you have so many zombie upgrades that the game is playing itself. Another feature I added is every few minutes an eyeball will pop up in a random place on the screen. If you don't click it within a couple seconds, it will disappear, but if you do, it creates a horde which multiplies the amount of clicks and per second zombies that you produce. And then finally, I added achievements and stats to the game as well. So I've never actually shown the code for this project to anyone because, to be honest, I was a little embarrassed by it. So the GitHub repo where I have this code hosted is completely private. It's been private since its inception, but today I'm going to share it publicly. On the surface, the game doesn't look too bad. It has little animations, it has interesting graphics, funny zombie sounds, but under the hood, it's just, as you can see, a complete spaghetti code mess. I have a couple different files for this game, but a very large majority is in this main activity.java, and it's nearly 3,000 lines long. One awful piece of logic that I have are these little blood drop animations. So each blood drop is an individual image, and I initialize them 31 times. So an individual image, I just reuse 31 times. And why 31? I have no idea. I just kept reusing it. The blood drop animation is just gonna hurt your brain, this logic, because 7 years later, I literally don't know what I was thinking. This animation logic is filled with, just complete random numbers that don't provide any meaning. So for example, I get a random number between 1 and 2, and if it's 1, I negate the X value and add 20 to it. I have no idea what the hell this means. The actual animation is done using this translate animation class, and I set these random duration values so that they get the effect that the blood drops are falling sporadically. I feel like the actual animations in the app look good, but I don't know, the way I implemented it was just awful. I feel like this piece of code really does deserve to go on like the programming horror subreddit. You might think this is bad, but wait till you see how I implemented achievements. So I initialize each achievement individually at the top of the file, and this function creates all 50 achievements in the game. So I had an achievement class that took in the name, description, picture, whether it is visible or not, a Boolean to determine if the achievement was actually achieved. And then finally, I have this crouton, which is a pop-up, and that determines if the achievement is currently being displayed to the user. I mean, just look at all of these variables that I keep track of. It's honestly hilarious to look at now because it's like I had never heard of for loops before at this time. It gets better with how I actually track the state of achievements and upgrades in the game. So all the data is stored locally on the user's phone using what's known as shared preferences in Android. And so whenever a user exits the game, this save function is ran, which once again, I guess I didn't know what for loops are because it would have made my life a lot easier. And then similarly, when a user opens the app again to play, a load function is ran to populate all of the state for the game. Another really badly implemented feature was how I display to the user that they got a new achievement using croutons. So croutons in Android are essentially just, they're little pop-ups. As you can see here, I got an achievement for long pressing the Earth button, which popped up. The code is just awful. For every single achievement, and there are over 50 of them, I check if the achievement variable's Boolean conditions are true. And if they are, I create a new crouton and I apply it to the main UI thread to be rendered on the screen. I mean, just look at how unnecessarily long this logic is. I could have easily done one for loop with all of the achievements and did this logic one time in the for loop. And what makes this even worse is that all of these if checks are happening for every iteration in the game loop. So speaking of the game loop, the way I implemented this, because I'm not using Unity or any game engine, I was just using the vanilla Android framework to do this. So my gameplay loop was that I had a run always function that runs every second. So I will check all of the achievements, displaying all of the, tip messages, displaying all the croutons, and all of that happens every second. I remember one really funny bug that I had when I was making this was the actual counter for how many zombies you have. I initially used an integer. The multipliers that I have are massive. And so when I was testing out the game one day, I let the game play itself, for a few hours, and I came back and saw that the count was actually a negative number. So this count variable right here. And at the time, I didn't really know what it meant because the number, went negative. And then after, a little bit of time, I figured out, oh, it's because I had an integer overflow. Another funny bug is that I straight up just disable the back button when you're in the app. So there's this piece of logic here and it says, do nothing, because I'm overriding the functionality of the button to just not work. And the reason I did that was because for some reason, whenever the user would do the back button, it wouldn't save their game, like the state of the game. And I didn't know how to fix it. So I just straight up disabled the back button. They couldn't use it. So yeah, this was my first project that I ever worked on. Not long after I started first getting into programming. I was learning the Android framework and the Java programming language at the same time. And yeah, as you can see, I didn't know what I was doing at all. But it's kind of cool to see how far I've come from, working on this project to now working at Google. It's just been a lot of progress over the years. So to end this video, I'm going to be making this code public for the first time. So if you want access to it, the link for that will be in the description. Happy coding.